Um, Thanks for having us. It is true. We were influential in Andrew and Susan's life and ministry. I would just say for the record, if he does anything you like, that was all me. If he does anything you don't like, that was the pastor he was at right before he got here. Because when he left me, he was perfect. So whatever mistakes he made, he picked up along the road. It is great to be here. It is cold. It was 20 below in New York City when we left yesterday, and I thought that was cold. And then all the way on the train, we kept seeing the cities we were going through, and it just kept getting colder and colder. And when we got off the train, it said it felt like 37 below. So yeah, you guys are cold. So, but thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for the warm hospitality. Thank you for the warm home, and it's a joy to be here. Just so you know, tomorrow night and Tuesday night are going to be really very casual. We're going to talk very briefly tomorrow night about contrary winds, and then on Tuesday night we're going to talk about an unrecognizable Jesus. And so before we get to either of those conversations, we need to have a conversation this morning that lays the framework and the foundation for the next two nights. They won't be late nights. They won't be, and the food will be good. So just come. It'll be very conversational. I just want you to be prepared for that. I think we've all gone through seasons of our life in which we've had unfulfilled expectations, unmet goals, dreams that have been broken or shattered, or for at least the most part have been not what we anticipated. And these can be difficult times for our spiritual growth, or they can be really deep times of personal growth for us. It begins with a perspective. It begins with us understanding God's perspective and us understanding our perspective. We have dreams, we have wishes, we have goals. Those come along to us different stages in our life. But sometimes they just don't line up with where we want to be, or where we think God is leading us, or where we think we should be. Maybe they're a result of a poor choice we made. Maybe they're a result of a wrong path we took. Sometimes it might have something to do with something somebody did to us, so it's a consequence of some choice that we made to be in a relationship with somebody who's done something to us. It can vary. Sometimes it's a combination of those things, and other times there's just simply no clear-cut reason for why these things seem to be happening to us, at least not a reason that we can pinpoint or we're going to see. I think when we begin our life and we grow into adulthood, we all believe that we're going to meet and finish life with the person that we marry. We believe that our careers are going to really blossom, and that the bosses are going to see something in us, and they're just going to elevate us to the top of the heap, and we'll become the shining star. They'll appreciate this value. When we get married, we think we're going to have whatever the average is, 2.5 kids, and at least one of those is going to become a doctor and is going to support us in our retirement. And I can tell you, the closer I get to retirement, the more that is the prayer of my heart. We trust and we hope. We have this dream that our kids are going to get married, and we're going to have these grandkids, and we're going to get to watch them all grow up into fine, young, upstanding people. When you go into the ministry, you have this dream or this hope that somehow God is going to do something really successful through your ministry, whatever you define success to be. That's kind of your hope and your dream. Well, God called me to it. I answered God's call. Surely He's going to fill every seat in the sanctuary. That's how we kind of go through life. Sometimes when these things happen to us, we look around and we see others whose lives are following those kind of good paths, and we wonder what's going wrong with ours, and we wonder, why isn't this happening to my life, and why is so-and-so getting this and I'm not, and we begin to look at others for our own value and success. Here's the truth in that. Everybody that you look at, every person that you see, everyone that you encounter has had a broken life, has had a broken dream, has had something that is shattered about what their future is going to look like. Nobody is living out this perfect plan for their life. Even if you can't see it, behind their life, behind their family, behind their career is just as much a fragmentation as ours. There's always another picture, and it's not always the reality that we think it is. Sometimes we begin to start asking God if those pictures even exist. Were they just figments of our own imagination? So let me just be clear. This really isn't an issue for me. What I wrestle with is God does in fact exist, and yet so does pain and suffering and shattered dreams. And if God is this all-loving, all-powerful, all-compassionate, all the time right kind of a God, and He is, reconciling those two things in my life and in my ministry are often difficult and challenging. So today I want to look at this wonderful and yet troubling story that comes from the Old Testament in 1 Samuel. Now, let me also say that you probably aren't going to get a lot of answers today. I don't have a lot of answers to the questions that I'm posing. I have a lot of questions. I just don't have a lot of answers. So that's why you have a pastor. He's going to be able to guide you into all truth and all of the answers after I blow out of town. But the reason I don't have answers is because there is no quick fix to this. There is no 21 steps to or 7 practical things or whatever those lists look like in your life. There is no quick fix to what we feel in our lives. Today we're really talking about putting our hearts and ourselves in a place so we can hear from God today and tomorrow and Tuesday and into the weeks and the months and the years ahead in our lives. This is a really unique story. And so before I get to the part of 1 Samuel 21 that I want to get to in just a minute, let me give you some of the backstory to the story of David. David is a shepherd boy. If we've been around the church any amount of time, we know that David has a reputation as a shepherd and a boy. He's a nobody. He's the youngest of all of the sons of Jesse, which means that he's less than nothing. He has no rights, no inheritance, no responsibilities. He gets told what to do by his older brothers. If you have a sibling, you know exactly what I'm talking about, especially if you're the run of the family. He is nobody. His father is Jesse, and we're going to come back to that at the end of this morning. So one day Samuel, who is the last of the Hebrew judges and the first of the prophets, he comes along and he says he is going to pick the next king of Israel. Now, as he looks over all of the men that are brought before him, he finally settles in on this runt of the litter, David. And a dream is born in David's life and in Jesse's life. David, this nobody, this runt of a family, he's now being prophesied as being the next king of Israel. Everybody hearing this thinks this is really weird. This would never happen this way. It doesn't make any sense. Samuel had anointed Saul as the first king of Israel, and everybody always believed that Saul's son Jonathan would follow him. And so in the middle of this story, Samuel, who has come in, he's anointed David. He now, just as mysteriously as he came, he turns and leaves and walks off stage. Life returns to normal. David's father, Jesse, comes to David one day and says, "Your brothers are off fighting with King Saul. Here, take them some lunch." When he arrives, he sees the Israelite army is in absolute chaos, being destroyed by the Philistines. They're paralyzed by this fear of encountering something they can't see their way through. This fear of even one person, this giant Philistine named Goliath. So David picks up 5 stones off of the ground. he only meets one. The rest are just to show off before his brothers. He picks up these 5 stones. He loads one into the slingshot. He believes God is going to work through him. And so he trusts what he feels. He trusts what he knows. He does what he knows to do when he encounters an obstacle that he can't overcome, that's bigger than him, that's fearful before him. And he brings Goliath down. The stone nails Goliath. He drops him to the ground. And David, just to make sure, grabs the sword of Goliath and decapitates him. In one moment, David goes from being this nobody shepherd boy to the hero of a nation. And Samuel's prophecy of David becoming king goes from being just a dream to a hope. Now, I'm not sure, but I think up to this point, David probably never thought this was more than a dream. He never really put much meat around what he had heard. But now he's got some hope that maybe Samuel was just right. Maybe Samuel knew what he was doing when he said, "You will be king." Saul loves David, marries him off to his daughter, and now David is the king's son-in-law. I think we've all been in this kind of a thing before. Maybe not the son-in-law of a king, but we've all been in this place where you have this dream, something in the middle of the dream shifts, and your dream really starts to look like it might become reality. You've met the guy or the gal of your dream. You get this promotion that you've been thinking and praying about. Your spouse says they'll go to counseling in an attempt to save the marriage. And you start thinking, hey, maybe this really is possible. And you begin to shift course, and the dream becomes a hope. But with David, it doesn't stay that way for long. And if you read through 1 Samuel, you'll understand why. You start to see this changing relationship between David and Saul. Everyone loves David. Everyone fears Saul. And the jealousy between the two begins to settle in. Jonathan has become best friends with David, and so he comes to warn David that his father Saul is plotting to kill him. And in the middle of that, Saul, who's now really angry, throws a spear at his own son, trying to kill him for ratting out his plan. This whole thing is about to explode in a new way. Jonathan's worst fear is confirmed. His dad is not only willing to kill him to preserve what he wants, he's willing to kill David. And there's this new layer that gets added to a dream and a hope, and it's a threat. There's a real-life threat to David's dream of becoming king. It's pretty tough to become king when the current king's trying to kill you. And so David does what David knows to do, and he runs. He feels his dream and his hope slipping away. He feels maybe like God has abandoned him. He begins to even question, is God even around? Is there even a God? Or was God just toying with him all along, putting him in this kind of a place? So I ask you this morning, have you ever felt like that? Have you ever had a dream, and for some period of your life it's turned into a hope, and now that hope gets threatened by some force or some person or some situation, maybe out of your control, maybe in your control, and you feel hopeless, and you feel there's nowhere to turn, and you feel there's no one to turn to? Because if you have, you do one of two things in that moment. You either trust or you control. You either trust or you control. It's one of those two things. David chooses control. He chooses to manipulate the circumstances of his life in order to control this dream and to protect the hope that he thinks is his. He comes to this point of truly believing that he can actually control the outcome of what God is asking him to do. Kind of reminds me of what it would be like watching our life with a God that controls it like a marionette puppet. Like there's a string that goes to our marriage, and there's a string that goes to our finances, there's a string that goes to our church, and there's a string that goes to our children, and there's a string that goes to our job. And we think we have everything under control by manipulating all of these things, and that kind of control is really just an illusion. But make no mistake, we love control. We love controlling those strings of our life. We love to know what God is doing to get us from point A to point B, or to get us from Warwick to Lowell to Williston. Or we want to know what God is doing with our life and how he's getting there. We want to know what God's plan A is. And so David chooses control. He chooses to step into this story by trying to control it. But that's the moment, taking control is the moment that your dream slips away, and trying to control it is the worst thing you can do. So, with that really long-winded backstory to this passage in Samuel, I thought it was easier than trying to preach through it. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 21, and it's verse 1 at the beginning of 1 Samuel 21. David went to the city of Nob to see Ahimelech the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he saw him. "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" So let's just pause there quickly. David shows up. He shows up alone. He's the son-in-law of the king. All of these things that are going on in his life, nobody knows about except David. There's no social media. There's no mass news. Hey, he's on the run. Somebody kill him. He shows up and he's all alone. And to the priest, he realizes immediately something is wrong, because the son of a king would never, ever, ever be alone. It would be like President Obama walking in here this morning and walking to the front and just sitting down, and you see nobody else with him. It would just never, ever happen. It wouldn't have happened then. It doesn't happen today. None of us would have believed it. Ahimelech didn't either. And so he asked David, "Why is no one with you?" Verse 2, "The king has sent me on a private matter," David said. "He told me not to tell anyone why I'm here. I have told my men where to meet me later. Now, what is there to eat? Give me 5 loaves of bread or anything else you have." "Well, we don't have any regular bread," the priest said, "but there's the holy bread, which I guess you can have if your young men have not slept with any woman recently." "Don't worry," David replied. "I never allow my men to be with women when they are on a campaign, and since they stay clean even on ordinary trips, how much more on this one?" So since there was no other food available, the priest gave him the holy bread, the bread of the presence that was placed before the Lord in the tabernacle. It had just been replaced that day with fresh bread. David does exactly what he knows how to do. He manipulates the situation by lying. He was so desperate to keep this hope of being king alive, that he resorts to what he knew best, controlling the situation, telling the story. So listen to me for a minute. I don't say a lot of quotable things, but here's one. You should write this one down. Cut it out, tape it to your refrigerator, put it on your computer at work, do whatever you need to do. But listen to this. Don't abandon your God-given values in pursuit of a God-given dream. Don't abandon your God-given values just to pursue a God-given dream. This was a big dream. Didn't start out that way, but David wasn't just sitting around some day thinking, "Boy, if I could be king," right? But that dream, that prophecy turned to hope. And when his hope got threatened, he was willing to do whatever he needed to do to protect that dream, including sacrificing his character, his integrity, his reputation, his honesty. Don't abandon your God-given values in pursuit of your God-given dream. Some of you have, and I don't really know you, so I'm just kind of throwing this out. If it sticks, that's on you, not on me. Some of you have participated in water cooler talk at your office in the hopes that it would bring somebody either at your level or slightly above you down a rung, and maybe you would move up a little bit in the eyes people around you. Maybe you fudged your resume a little bit so you could get a little better job. You abandon your God-given values just to keep your dream alive. Some of you wanted that boy or that girl at school to notice you or to talk to you or to be interested in you. And so you did whatever you needed to do to get their attention. You dressed differently, you talked differently, you did things that were different, you used language that you'd never used, but somehow it made you cool around your coworkers or your fellow classmates. You were willing to do whatever you needed to do in this pursuit of love. You abandon your God-given values just to keep your dream alive. That's what David is doing right here. Picking it up, verse 8. So David asked Ahimelech, "Do you have a spear or a sword?" The king's business was so urgent that I didn't even have time to grab a weapon. Now, you know all of this is a lie, so just keep that in mind. "I only have the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah," the priest replied. "It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. Take that if you want, for there is nothing else here." "There is nothing like it," David said. "Give it to me." In this moment, David gets reunited with a relic of his past. He gets reunited with an icon that reminds him of what God did for him then. God's commitment to be faithful to an entire nation was wrapped up in a cloth in the sword of the Philistine. The sword that David could barely pick up as a young shepherd boy is now in the hands of a future king. That sword represented God can do things in the midst of the impossible, and David has his hand around it. It is as if God is saying to David, "See, this is what you could do if you would just trust me and not try and control things." David totally missed that moment. It flew by him. He should have gone, "Oh, I see it. I see this coming full circle. I see what you're trying to say to me, God," but he didn't. Listen, you and I, we got to find a way to remember God's faithfulness in the midst of these shattered dreams of our life. Or we're always going to have a hard time trusting him with our future. God placed this icon of faithfulness in David's past so he'd remember who God was and who God is and who God will always be in his life. And David missed it. And so here's the question that we wrestle with today. What icons has God placed in our life to remind us of his faithfulness to us? But we're so wrapped up in controlling it that we miss it, that we can't see it. This is your moment. This is my moment. Trust God or control. You feel your dream is slipping away. Are you going to trust him or are you going to try and control it? There are icons of God's faithfulness in your life right now that God wants you to see, that he has placed around you. And the only question is whether you're going to see them and trust in them or still control your life. Maybe it's your spouse, this constant reminder of the gift of love that God is giving you. Maybe it's a child. Maybe you had a difficult pregnancy and this has turned out to be amazingly great. Maybe it's a letter that your mom or your dad wrote to you at some point, prompted by God. It was a pivotal moment. You had to make a decision, and this note, this letter, this news arrived. Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's a job that you had no idea how you got, but somehow if you look hard enough, you'll see that God's hand was over it. Maybe it's your Bible that's falling apart, but in the back are notes and words and phrases and things that you jotted down at one point in your journey in which God was speaking directly into your life. Maybe it's your small group. Maybe it's your church. Maybe it's your pastor. You have all of these things in your life where God has proven to you time and time again that he's faithful. And the decision is, will you remember these times and these moments and trust him? Or will you forget and ignore and deny that they exist? What is the icon that God has in your life to remind you that he's faithful? David misses it and he keeps running. He comes to Gath. He's captured. He continues to lie. He even, at one point, pretends he's insane. And he starts foaming at the mouth so the king won't kill him. So what do you do? What's your reaction? When you're confronted with these things, what do you do? Where do you run? What do you run to? What's your pattern? I guarantee you have one. You might have not have thought about it. But I'll bet if you talk to somebody close in your life, a spouse, a kid, a parent, they can tell you what your pattern is. They can tell you exactly what you do when you stop trusting God, because they see it in you. Do you run to a bottle? Do you run to pills? Do you overeat? Do you retaliate? Do you gossip? Do you lie? Do you cheat? Do you go on social media? What do you do? If we continue to choose to control instead of trust, we're all going to run to something. See, I think David and us are more alike than we really want to acknowledge. David assumes that he understands God's ways. He thinks he knows what God should be doing. And the moment that we do that, our world crumbles around us. And we'll grab for anything. We'll grab for whatever's convenient, easy, cheap, closest to us. That's what we'll take. So let me just wrap up this story. David's on the run. Saul finds out. Saul goes after him. When he comes to Nob and he questions the priest about David, the priest said that we gave him his sword. And now Saul is furious. He orders all of the priests, 85 priests, order all of the priests, all of their families, all of their children, anyone associated with them, to be killed. But one of the sons of the priests escaped, finds David, and we have this encounter in chapter 22. Only Abiathar, one of the sons of Elimelech, escaped and fled to David. When he told David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord, David exclaimed, "I knew it. When I saw Doeg there that day, I knew he would tell Saul, 'Now I have caused the death of all of your father's family. Stay here with me, and I will protect you with my own life, for the same person wants to kill us both.'" Something in the middle of this changes about David. Something alerts him to the patterns that he has in his life. For the rest of his life, he's going to live with this memory that 100 or more people died because of his lies, his gossip, his inability to face up to letting God and trusting God have control of his life, his decisions. He comes to the conclusion that in his own life, this isn't working. Stay here with me. I'll protect you with my own life. There's only two of them and one sword, which basically means David is saying, I will give my life for you when Saul finds us. When your life isn't turning out the way you want. It doesn't mean that your life is just spinning out of control. It really means that you aren't the one in control. Shattered dreams come with heavy emotions. They drive us to do things that we would not normally do. And if we're honest with each other, we often have this regret in our life. And the regret is from decisions that we made, or a person that we were with, or words we spoke, or things that happened, almost all the time when a dream and a hope aren't coming true for us. David gets to that place where he learns that just because he can't figure it out doesn't mean God doesn't have it figured out. Maybe the plan for his life will turn out different. I think David gets to the point of saying, not my plan, God's dream. Not my picture, God's promise. Not my desire, God's will. And what happens to David once he does that? Remember I told you to remember Jesse, the father? Listen to how Matthew records this. This is a record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah, a descendant of King David and of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah. Their mother was Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz. His mother was Rahab. Boaz was the father of Obed. His mother was Ruth. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David. You see, even when our dreams are shattered, and even when our hopes are dashed, and even when we've run in a different direction, and even when we've experienced and caused untold pain in people's lives, God is always at work reclaiming the story. He's always at work reconciling us unto Him. He's always drawing us back closer to Him than we've ever been. Listen, His desire isn't for you to have shattered dreams and fall. His desire is to be in that deep, reconciled, restored relationship with you. He takes this guy, David, and places him in the line of Jesus. You are in the line of somebody. You are in the line of the God that created you, whose desire is to restore and reconcile and not crush and not destroy and not bring suffering into your life. Do we have shattered dreams? Absolutely. Nobody here has gone through life. I don't know, there's some babies, but outside of babies, nobody here has gone through life and not had something, not had a hope dashed, a dream shattered, something crushed in who they are. I want to tell you in closing, and I know you're going to go long, but I promise I won't be this long tomorrow night. I want to tell you why I shared that story with you this morning. Literally, 5 years ago today, I preached that same sermon, or a version of that same sermon, to our church in Warwick. And I'm going to look at you all because if I look over here, I'm very emotional. I'll start crying, and I have a cold anyway. That was ordination interview weekend on the Metro New York District for the Church of the Nazarene. Andrew was being interviewed. I was being interviewed. The four of us, my wife, Susan, Andrew, and I, we drove in to Long Island together for our ordination interviews. It's a much longer story, so I'll save you, but let's just say that our ordination interviews didn't go all that well for him or for us. Our district superintendent said, don't worry, no problems. You guys will be fine. If they're not going to pass you, I'll talk to them. You'll be fine. He said, I'll call you tonight. I'll let you know. So stopped, had barbecue on the way home through New York City, got back to our place. Didn't hear anything that night. This whole series was set up to preach over the coming 4 to 5 weeks. I get a text. I texted my DS on Sunday morning because we hadn't heard. And we were, that's, you want to know. So I wrote the DS and I said, is there any news? And I got this text back from him that said, yes, they approved you. They did not approve Andrew. Now, I'm in my office reading this, right? I know I'm about to preach this series starting on shattered dreams, right? I get up on the platform in a stool, and thank you for a stool, by the way. This was my thing. I always preach sitting down in a stool. It just was my thing. And I look back at the back of our sanctuary, which was a fan shape, much shorter, but spread out in a fan shape. And there in the back row, where the youth pastor always sat with the teens, was Andrew and Susan. And I began this sermon knowing that in the next few hours, I was about to shatter the dream of a young man. Part of the reason he was escalating his order, he took like 6 classes that year because he wanted to get his order. He didn't want to get ordained because he wanted to be ordained with me, which I think, would have been nice. That wasn't it. His mother was sick and dying, and he wanted to get ordained before his mother died. We sat in his living room that afternoon, and my brilliant wife, after we had told them the news, my brilliant wife, who's much more in tune to these things than I am, said, maybe this happening is going to let your mom live longer because her hope will still be alive. And she did. She lived to see her son ordained. And she lived to see Luke born. I'm not taking credit for that. So just so you know. What I'm saying is sometimes we have these things that appear to be shattered dreams to us in one moment, but when you get removed from it and you look back and you see what God has done with it, they're amazing. I think on David's deathbed, even of all the stuff he had gone through, at some point he looked back on his life and said, wow, God was really over all of that stuff. I mean, basically, it's what the book of Psalms is, but that's how we're to live our life. Shattered dreams are going to come. The hopes are going to die. Things aren't going to work out the way we want. Are we going to trust or we control? Don't abandon your God-given values in pursuit of your God-given dream. If God has given you a dream, He's going to see you through to it. That's my testimony. So we're going to sing, right? Something? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to sing. I'm third generation Nazarene. We don't know what to do except to just at the end of church open an altar and just see if. And it's not because I'm counting or I have to report anything. I don't. But maybe somehow in the middle this morning, God has said to you, that thing that you've been trying to control, that dream that you've been trying to hold on to, that dream that you've been trying to orchestrate everything around, God is saying, just trust me. Just trust me. And maybe, I don't know what your traditions are here, so I'm just kind of going to old Nazarene school. There are altars and there are benches and there are even Kleenexes. So apparently they get used. Maybe you just want to come and have a quiet time of prayer with God and just say, God, I get it. I see it. I'm willing to just trust you. I don't know I don't know any of you. So I don't know what your hope is. I don't know what your dream is. I don't know what God is doing with it. Maybe you just want to say, I'm in, God. I trust you. And so I don't know what we're singing, but we're going to stand, we're going to sing. And if in that moment, for you, it's an important time to come and step forward and just kneel and pray. Nobody's going to bother you. Nobody's going to, make you sign anything. Just let it be a time when you are in the presence of God, and God says, you can trust me. We've got this. So let's stand. And when they're done, Andrew's going to come and say a prayer. And then I'll see you tomorrow night and Tuesday, I hope.